How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Tzadi Aleph, Daf 91 of Masechta Ksubis, friends. Okay, well, the Daf starts talking about, continuing where we left off yesterday about the Ksubas ben Dichrin in that situation where Reuven's married to Rivka dies now, then, that whole thing. And then we get to a new Mishnah also talking about Ksubis ben Dichrin. So that's kind of what we're talking about over here. So we're going to start in Daf Tzadi Amud Beis, about 2, 4, 6 lines from the bottom. First words on the line. V'hani tunai kiani tunai. So this machlokas about, okay, we have to talk about the situation again. What's the situation? Who could tell me? So you have Reuven. Reuven is married to Sarah. It's like we're in Yavamis again. Hillel Esther. Okay. So Reuven is married to Sarah. Sarah dies, which means that Reuven inherits her Ksubis. Fine. Now, Reuven, after Sarah dies, Reuven marries Rivka. And then Reuven dies. Okay. So now, Rivka's heirs collect Rivka's Ksubis. Rivka's heirs collect Rivka's Ksubis. Now, what's interesting about Rivka's heirs collecting Rivka's Ksubis is that they're basically like creditors, right? Meaning, when Reuven died, he was still married to Rivka, which means that Rivka has this document, this Ksubis document that says that she's owed money. Rivka then dies. Now her kids have this document. But when they go to claim their mother's Ksubis, it's as like creditors coming to Reuven's estate and saying, hey, we're owed money. And then the question is, once they extract the money from their mother, Rivka's Ksubis, can Sarah's heirs collect her Ksubis as Ksubas ben Dichrin, right? It's that her kids collect her Ksubis, or do we say that the inheritance just gets divided up equally among all of Reuven's heirs? Okay, so let's say that the question about do Sarah's heirs have can they collect their Ksubas ben Dichrin, or is just all of Reuven's inheritance divided up equally among all the heirs? So let's say it's like the following machlokas tanoim. The Tanya is learning the Brisa. Nosa sarishona v'meisa. Okay, so if Reuven marries Sarah and Sarah dies, Nosa sashniya umeisu. Then Reuven marries Rivka and then Reuven dies, and then Rivka dies, and now so now boin boneh shalzo la'achar misa v'notling ksubas imun. So the way we want to understand this now is that we're saying now, right? So now, Rivka's heirs come with their mother's Ksubis after Reuven dies, and they collect Rivka's Ksubis as creditors, right? That they're collecting this document. Okay, and that's it. And then Reuven and Sarah's kids, they don't get the Ksubas ben Dichrin or anything like that. Reb Shimon Omer says, Reb Shimon, im yesh moser dinar elu notling ksubas imon ve'elu notling ksubas imon. Whereas Reb Shimon says, well, if after Rivka's heirs and Sarah's heirs collect their respective ksubas, if afterwards there is still a dinar left over in the estate of Reuven, so then, yes, Sarah's heirs and Rivka's heirs can each collect their mother's Ksubas ben Dichrin, Givaldik. The imla, but if there's no leftover dinar, Cholken b'shaveh, so then whatever is left of Reuven's estate after Rivka's heirs collect their Ksubas as creditors, whatever is left in Reuven's estate will be divided equally among Sarah's heirs and Rivka's heirs. So let's say that the machlokas here is the marsav achas b'chai v'achas b'moso yesh ksuvas ben dichrin. So let's say that Reb Shimon holds that in this case, Sarah's heirs would be able to collect Ksubas b'nin dichrin. Whereas the Tanakama holds that Sarah's heirs would be unable to collect their mother's ksube as ksubas b'nin dichrin. Lo d'chuliam achas b'chai b'achas b'moso yesh lehem ksubas b'nin dichrin. To which the Gemara says no. Both the Tanakama and Reb Shimon agree that in this case, where Sarah dies and then Reuven dies and then Rivka dies, so Sarah's heirs would be able to collect ksubas b'nin dichrin. However, v'acha b'dinar mikarkoi kamiflege. However, in this particular case, there is not a dinar of property. There's a dinar of metaltalin, of movable items, of metaltalin, but there is no dinar of property. And the machlokas between the Tanakama and Reb Shimon is regarding if that counts. That the Tanakama says, no, it needs to be a dinar of property. It can't be a dinar of metaltalin. And therefore, Sarah's heirs do not collect ksubas b'nin dichrin. Whereas Reb Shimon says, no, even a dinar of metaltalin is acceptable, and therefore Sarah's heirs collect ksubas b'nin dichrin. The Tanakama says that the dinar would have to be property, it cannot be metaltalin. Whereas Reb Shimon says even metaltalin would be able to count as this dinar, and then that enables Sarah's kids to collect ksubas b'nin dichrin. But can you actually say that Reb Shimon would say that a dinar of metaltalin would enable Sarah's heirs to collect ksubas b'nin dichrin? We're going to learn in the Mishnah later on on this Amud. Reb Shimon Omer says, Reb Shimon, that even if after Sarah's heirs and Rivka's heirs collect their respective mother's ksubas, there is a dinar of metaltalin left over, but no dinar of karka, but there is a dinar of metaltalin, einan klum, it's irrelevant. Ad sheisham nechosim sheyesh le'en achrayis. Yasser Abbe's Ksubas dinar. That additional dinar would have to be property. It's irrelevant if it is movable objects, if it's metaltalin. So we see that Reb Shimon says that dinar cannot be metaltalin. So rather, the machlokas here is that there was a dinar of property above and beyond the value of the two ksubis, but that property was nechasim mishubadim. There was a lien on it. The Tanakama says that the dinar of property would have to be unliened properties, free properties. Whereas Reb Shimon says, no, even if it's nachasim mishubadim, that's fine. The Sarah's heirs would still be able to collect ksubas b'nin dichrin. If that's the case, Reb Shimon Omer, im yesh sham moser dinar, kevon sheyesh sham moser dinar mibayle. But one second, that doesn't necessarily make sense. Meaning, according to this, both the Tanakama and Reb Shimon are talking about a situation where there is a dinar, that there is a dinar left over. The thing is that that dinar is nechasim mishubadim. So Tanakama says it doesn't work. Reb Shimon says it does work. But if that's the case, what does Reb Shimon say in the Brisa? He says, Im yesh sham mosar dinar. If there's a dinar there, so then they can collect. But if we're saying that both according to the Tanakama and according to Reb Shimon, there's a dinar there, so Reb Shimon shouldn't be responding to the Tanakama and say, if there's a dinar, then they can collect. No, he should be saying, since there's a dinar, they can collect. I.e., Tanakama is saying, look, I understand that there's a dinar, but it's nechasim mishubadim, that doesn't work. Whereas Reb Shimon is saying, no, since there's a dinar, as long as there's a dinar, it's fine. So it shouldn't be saying if there's a dinar. Of course, everyone agrees there's a dinar. The question is that, right, what Reb Shimon should be saying then is that since there's a dinar, regardless of if it's nechasim mishubadim or not, they would be able to collect their Sarah's kids heirs would be able to collect their ksubim. Ella b'pachos midinar kamiflege. So rather, machlokas is that there is less than a dinar left over. Marsava dinar in pachos midinar lo. The Tanakama says that there would have to be a dinar left over. Less than a dinar is not enough. Whereas Reb Shimon says even if there's less than a dinar, then still Sarah's heirs would be able to collect Nechasim Ksubas B'nei Dichrin. Reb Shimon dinar kamer. What do you mean that Reb Shimon is saying that Sarah's heirs would be able to collect Ksubas B'nei Dichrin even if there's less than a dinar? Idavka says that it needs to be a dinar, right? He says Im Yesha Mosar dinar. That if there is a dinar there, not less than a dinar, so v'chitema eipoch. And if you're going to say, well, flip it around. What does flip it around mean? Flip it around means that actually, when the Tanakama says that they collect their ksuba, what does the Tanakama say? When it says that this, right, the heirs of this wife can collect the ksuba, we understood that to mean Rivka's heirs collected as creditors, but that's actually not the case. Let's say that it's talking about Sarah's heirs, and it's saying that Sarah's heirs are collecting the ksuba's b'nei dichrin, and that's even if it's less than a dinar. And then comes Reb Shimon to say that no, it has to im yesham Moser dinar, then they can collect. So let's say, punkt vakert. So let's say that we're not talking about Rivka's heirs collecting the Nechasim Shubadim according to the Ksubas B'nei Dichrin according to the Tanakama. We're talking about Sarah's heirs collecting Ksubas B'nei Dichrin, and it's talking about where there's less than a dinar above and beyond the value of the two Ksubas. And Tanakama says that Sarah's heirs can collect Ksubas B'nei Dichrin, and Reb Shimon is saying no, there needs to be a dinar. He's being more stringent. Tanakama d'masnisa nami dinar kama, but that can't be because the Tanakama in the Mishnah that we're going to get to shortly, who argues with Reb Shimon, and we're saying that the Tanakama there it would agree with the Tanakama in our Brisa, says also that there would have to be a dinar. So therefore we can't explain that the Tanakama in our Brisa is saying that Sarah's heirs can collect Ksubas B'nei Dichrin even if there's less than a dinar left over. So Ella kihanach trelishnei lishnoi kamoi ve'epoch. Rather, it's a machlokes about, like we said earlier, if the dinar is nechasim shubadim or if it's metaltalin, and we're saying that the Tanakama, right, ve'epoch, right, we're saying it's like this new way of understanding it, that the Tanakama is saying that Sarah's heirs would be able to collect Ksubas B'nei Dichrin even if the dinar is of nechasim shubadim or is metaltalin, and Reb Shimon is saying no, that extra dinar would have to be nechasim b'nei chorin in order for Sarah's kids to be able, in order for Sarah's heirs to be able to collect Ksubas B'nei Dichrin. Friends, what do you want me to tell you? Amar Mai, we said earlier, Amar Mazutra, Mishmei de Rav Papa, Mazutra says the name of Rav Papa, so that the halacha is, Achaz ba'achai v'achaz b'moso, that in this case, right, with the Sarah, and then Sarah dies, and then marries Rivka, that whole thing, Yishlan Ksubas B'nei Dichrin, so then Sarah's heirs would be able to collect Ksubas B'nei Dichrin. Uchsuba naises mosa lachaverta, and additionally, as we had mentioned earlier, right, on yesterday's daf, that the payment of Rivka's ksuba to her heirs enables Sarah's kids to collect ksubas b'nei dichrin even if there's nothing left in the estate. Once it's collected. Bishlama So I understand that to say that in this case there's ksubas b'nei dichrin for Sarah's heirs, and if we wouldn't then additionally point out that the ksuba, that Rivka's ksuba being paid essentially enables Sarah's heirs to collect the ksubas b'nei dichrin, Hava Amina, I would think Yika Moser dinar in Ilolo. So if it didn't say that Ksuba Nasas Mosa Lechaverta, I would think that in order for Sarah's heirs to be able to collect Ksubas B'Nedichrin, there would have to be an additional dinar, right? Meaning, oh man, okay. Right, we had said yesterday, right, in general, right, in order for, do I have to get into all this again? Okay. What's the standard case of Ksubas B'Nedichrin? Standard case of Ksubas B'Nedichrin, right, is that Reuben is married to Sarah and Rivka, and then in order to sort of encourage Sarah and Rivka's fathers to give them a large dowry, we say that, don't worry, your grandkids are going to be the sole inheritors of your Ksuba. Don't worry, none of the grandkids from a different wife are going to be able to touch it. Fine. Now, Reuven marries Sarah and Rivka die, Reuven inherits them. Reuven now dies. Now the kids, when they're dividing up the inheritance, the first thing that they do is that Sarah's kids take the value of her ksuba, Rivka's kids take the value of her ksuba, and then whatever is left over after that, they divide up equally among everyone. Now, that assumes that there has to be a dinar left over, right? And that, because ksubas b'nedichrin is midar abanon, and as long as there's one dinar left over that they can divide up equally among everybody, which is how inheritance works midar raisa, so as long as there's one dinar that they can be mekayim the daraisa, then you can do whatever you want with the ksubas b'nedichrin. Fine. Now the question is, what happens in a case like ours, right? Where Reuben was married to Sarah, then Sarah dies, then he marries Rivka, then Reuben dies, and then Rivka dies, now there's the heirs. So Rivka's heirs are coming to collect her ksuba as creditors, because they have a document claiming that they're owed money. So they're coming as creditors. And now, the thing is that there is not enough money in Reuven's estate to pay for both ksubas. Now, Rivka's kids are coming as creditors, and they're collecting their mother's ksuba. Now, whatever is left in the estate is not enough to cover Sarah's ksuba. And the question is, are Sarah's kids entitled to collect essentially the rest of the estate as their mother's ksuba? Or do we say that the estate has to be divided equally among Sarah's heirs and Rivka's heirs? Now, this hinges upon the fact, right, because, right, we said that Ksubas B'Nedichrin only works if there is additional money that could be worked midoraisa. But the thing is, we already were Makayim Yerusha Doraisa by allowing Rivka's kids to collect as creditors, right? Because that's how Yerusha Doraisa works, that if there are people who are owed money, so they get paid from the estate. And we're doing that with Rivka's kids. So should that enable Sarah's kids now to be able to collect their mother's ksuba, even though after that there won't be anything left? So we're saying that, and that's what this ksuba nasas mosa lechaverta means. That this ksuba, right, Rivka's ksuba that's collected as a creditor, which is essentially Yerusha de Oraisa, that says that creditors can get paid from the estate. Since we're being Makayim Yerusha de Oraisa there, that enables Sarah's heirs to be able to collect their Ksubas B'Nedichrin, even though nothing will be left. Fine. So we're saying that we need Rav Papa to be telling us that there's Ksubas B'Nedichrin in this case, and that Ksuba Naisis Mosa Lechaverta, because if we didn't say Ksuba Naisis Mosa Lechaverta, I would think that there's only Ksubas B'Nedichrin for Sarah's heirs if there's an additional dinar. Therefore, I need to also say that Ksuba Naisis Mosa Lechaverta to say that no, Sarah's heirs can collect even if there isn't anything left over afterwards. So Ella Lishma'inon Ksuba Naisis Mosa Lechaverta, but why do I need to be told that there's Ksubas B'Nedichrin here? Why not just say that Ksuba Naisis Mosa Lechaverta, and then B'meila I know Mishum da'achas b'chai v'achas b'moso yeshen ksubas b'nedichrin. Can you just tell me ksuba naisis mosa lechaverta? What's the implication of that? The implication of that is that from the fact that Rivka's heirs are being paid as creditors, B'meila, what's the significance of that? The significance of that is that we're being Mekayim Yerusha de Oraisa, which then would enable Sarah's heirs to collect their ksuba, which means Memela that there's ksubas b'nedichrin in this case. So why not just say ksuba nasis motzah lechaverta? You don't have to tell me that there's ksubas b'nedichrin. I know that there's ksubas b'nedichrin because that's the whole point of ksuba nasis motzah lechaverta. So Yashmina Nahachi, if we would say like this, Hava Amina, I would say Kigon Shenosa Shalosh Noshim Umesu Shtayim B'chai V'achas B'moso V'achtamais Lachar Misa Yoledis Nekeva Hi. So Wow. If that were the case, if it didn't say that there's ksubas bin indichrin in this case, I would think that we would only say ksuba naisis mosa la chaverta in a case where Reuven was married to 3 women. Reuven was married to Sarah, Rivka, and Rachel. Now Sarah and Rivka both died while Reuven was still alive, and he inherited those 2 ksubas, which is basically a standard case of ksubas bin indichrin, right? That the husband inherits the ksubas, and then when he dies, the kids then divide up the ksubas before dividing up the rest of the estate. Now, what happens in this case, Reuven marries Sarah and Rivka, and they both die. He now marries Rachel, and then Reuven dies. Now the thing is, Rachel has a daughter. She doesn't have any sons. So therefore, there isn't any inheritance that's going to Rachel's daughter or anything. So after Rachel's daughter gets paid the ksuba, then it's just a standard case of ksubas bin indichrin, right? That you have Sarah's heirs and Rivka's heirs, and they'll just divide up. It'll be a regular case essentially at this point of ksubas bin indichrin. So therefore, I might think that only in that case we would say ksubas bin indichrin. But in a case where, in our case we've been discussing where Reuven is married to Sarah, Sarah dies, then Reuven dies, he marries Rivka, then Reuven dies, I might think that we wouldn't say ksubas bin indichrin in that case. So therefore, Rav Papa is telling us explicitly that in a situation of achaz b'chai, achaz b'moso, there is ksubas bin indichrin for Sarah's heirs. Okay, what do you want me to tell you? So we can read that last part again. If it wouldn't tell us explicitly that by achaz b'chai and achaz b'moso there's ksubas bin indichrin, I may have thought I may have thought that only in that ksuba naisis most of the chaverta would be in a situation where Reuven is married to 3 women. He's married to Sarah, Rivka, and Rachel. And Sarah and Rivka die while Reuven's alive, and he inherits their ksubas. V'achas b'moso, and then Reuven dies, and then Rachel dies. And Rachel had a daughter, and therefore she's not shaykh to the inheritance, but she'll collect her mother's ksubah. And then we'll say that she collects her ksubah, and then the payment of that ksubah is Yerusha Midoraisa, which would then enable the heirs of Sarah and Rivka who had died before Reuven died to collect their ksubas as ksubas bin indichrin. Aval achaz b'chayim v'achaz b'moso. But in our case, where Sarah died when Reuven was alive, and then Rivka died after Reuven died, but l'achar misa yuled zachar, and Rivka has a son. Right, fine. I might think that maybe there is no ksubas bin indichrin for Sarah's kids, because then Sarah's kids and Rivka's kids will fight, because Rivka's kids are going to be like, hey, why are you getting the entire rest of the inheritance? I mean, we were also entitled to inherit our father. So therefore we say no, even in this case of achaz b'chai, achaz b'moso, there's still ksubas bin indichrin for Sarah's kids. Okay, and now we get to a new Mishnah, also discussing ksubas bin indichrin. Mishoya nosu shtei noshim. So you have Reuven is married to Sarah and Rivka. Vamesu, and Sarah and Rivka both died. V'achar kach mesu, and then Reuven dies. Okay, so Reuven was married to Sarah and Rivka. Sarah and Rivka died, so he inherited their ksubas. Okay, now Reuven dies. V'yisomim mavakshin ksubas imon. Okay, and then Sarah's heirs are going to collect her ksuba. Rivka's heirs are going to collect her ksuba. Ve'ein sham elashtei ksubis. However, the thing is that his estate is only equal exactly or less to the value of the ksubas, which means that after Sarah's heirs and Rivka's heirs collect their ksubas, there won't be anything left. Cholkin b'shava. Well, then we ignore ksubas bin indichrin, which is only midirabanan, and we divide up the estate equally among all the heirs, which is how inheritance works midoraisa. But hayash amosar dinar. But if the value of Reuven's estate after Sarah's heirs collect her ksuba and Rivka's heirs collect her ksuba, there's still a dinar or more left over in Reuven's estate. Well, then eilu notling ksubas iman ve'eilu notling ksubas iman. Well, then Reuven's heirs collect Sarah's heirs collect Sarah's ksuba, Rivka's heirs collect Rivka's ksuba, and then whatever's left over, they divide up equally. Im amru yisov manachnu ma'ilem anichse avinu yafe dinar kedei shilu ksubas iman. if, let's say, Sarah's ksuba is more valuable than Rivka's ksuba, and therefore Sarah's heirs want to collect her ksuba because they'll get more of the inheritance that way, more of the Reuben's estate that way. So Sarah's heirs would be willing to inflate the value of Reuven's estate so that after the ksubas are paid, there would still technically be a dinar left over at the inflated price. Ein shomen loin, we do not listen to Sarah's heirs and allow them to do that. No, we take Reuven's estate and we evaluate it in a proper court, with, and evaluate and appraise the estate that way. And if there is if there's enough value in the estate, to have a dinar left over, so then they can have ksubas b'nei dichrin, but if not, then not. What if there is not enough value in Reuven's estate, but Reuven's father is still alive, and eventually Reuven's father is going to die, and then Reuven's kids are going to inherit his father, and at that point there would be more than a dinar left over after the ksubas are collected. So can we say, well, since in the future when Reuven's father dies, the estate will be valuable enough to enable Sarah and Rivka's heirs to collect their respective ksubis, so maybe they can collect ksubis b'nei dichrim based on the potential inheritance in the future? No, it doesn't work like that. We can only rely upon Reuven's estate. Reb Shimon Omer says, even if the value of even if there is a value of a dinar left over, but it's metaltlin, it's not karka. Einon klum, it's irrelevant. There has to be property that is worth at least a dinar above and beyond the value of Sarah and Rivka's ksuba. Says the Gemara, Tanur Abanon, says the rabbis taught, Lazu elev v'lazu chomesh meos, if Sarah's ksuba was valued at 1,000 zuz, and Rivka's ksuba was valued at 500 zuz, im yesh sham mosar dinar, if after Sarah's heirs collect their 1,000 and Rivka's heirs collect their 500, there is still a dinar left in the value of Reuben's estate. So then, okay, Givaldik. So Sarah's heirs collect their 1,000, Rivka's heirs collect their 500, and then the rest of the estate, whatever's left over, is divided up equally among all the heirs. And if after collecting Sarah and Rivka's ksubas respectively, there is no money left, i.e. the value of Reuven's estate was equal to or less than 1,500 zuz, the value of the two ksubas. So if there is not enough money, so then they divide up everything equally. There's no ksubas b'nei dichrin. Pshita meruben v'nismaitu kvarzochu ben yorshin. So now the Gemara says, okay, it's obvious that in a situation where at the time that Reuven died, there was the value of the estate was enough. The value of the estate was such that there would be a dinar left over, but then, prices dropped. Zochuba and Yorshin. Well, since at the time that Reuven died, the estate had enough value, so then, they would collect subas b'nei dichrin. Mu'atim v'nisrabu mai. But what if at the time that Reuven died, the estate was not valued, right? If we take the example from the previous line, right? So Sarah's ksuba is valued at 1,000, Rivka's ksuba is valued at 500. So if at the time that Reuven died, his estate was less worth than 1,500, what? His estate was worth less than 1,500, but then things went up in value. Can Sarah's heirs who have a more valuable ksuba, can they say, well, now the value of the estate is valuable enough that we can collect ksubas b'nei dichrin. So Tashma, come in here. Dinichse devei bar tzartzur mu'atim v'nisarbu havu. A fellow, right? This fellow passed away, and at the time that he passed away, the estate was not worth enough, but then it increased in value. They came before Amram Amrlu, and he said to them, Zilu paisinu. And he said to Rivka's heirs, basically, like, sorry, we're doing ksubas b'nei dichrin over here, and Sarah's heirs are gonna collect 1,000, and you collect 500. Lo ashkechu, and Rivka's heirs were not going to hear it. Amrlu ilom ifaisitu leu, and Rav Amram says to them, look, if you're not going to listen to this ruling, machina luchu besilva dlo mabot dama, I'm going to hit you with a thorn that doesn't cause any blood, meaning I'm going to excommunicate you. Shajunu l'kamei de Rav Nachman, he sent, so Rav Amram sends them before Rav Nachman, Amrlen, and Rav Nachman said, punkt fakert actually, Kshem she merubim v'nismaitu, zachu ben yorshin, just like when, at the time that the father dies, if the estate was valuable enough, but then it went down in value, we would still apply Ksubis ben Indichrin. So kach muatim v'nisabu zachu ben yorshin, well, the same thing would apply, that if at the time that the father died, the estate was not valuable enough, so then the same thing would apply, that if that's the case, then we would not collect Ksubis ben Indichrin, even if it increases in value, right? So just like if it's valuable enough when the father dies, and then it goes down in price, well, we say since at the time that the father died it was valuable enough, so we do apply Ksubis ben Indichrin. So the same thing is also punkt fakert, that if at the time that the father died, the estate was not worth enough and then went up in value, still we go based on the time that the father died, it was not valuable enough, we would not collect Ksubis ben Indichrin. And therefore, in this case, where when the father died, the estate was not valuable enough, so then we would not apply Ksubis ben Indichrin, and we would just divide up the estate equally among all the heirs. Okay, there was a certain fellow who owed 1,000 zuz. Okay, let's call him Shimon. Shimon owed Ruvain 1,000 zuz. Okay, so Shimon owed Ruvain 1,000 zuz. Havule trea padne. Now Shimon had two palaces. Zabinu, chad b'chomish me'er v'chad b'chomish me'er. Shimon had two palaces and he sold them to Levi. He sold each one for 500 zuz. So Shimon owes Ruvain 1,000 zuz. Shimon has two properties, right? Two palaces. He sells them to Levi, each one for 500 zuz, which is the value. So together, that's the value of what he owes Ruvain, 1,000 zuz. Also, Balchov Tarfa l'chada minayu. Ruvain goes to Levi and says, Levi, I'm sorry, you bought property that had a lien on it. And he goes and he chapsarayim one of the palaces. Hodar katorf leidach, and he came back now to chaparayim the second palace, right? Because each one was 500 zuz. He's owed 1,000 zuz from Shimon. So he chapsarayim the first palace that was purchased for 500 zuz. Now he's going to chaparayim the second one so that he can, get back the full value of what he's owed. Shakal alpha zuze. Now Levi didn't want to lose these two palaces that he just bought, so Levi takes out 1,000 zuz, v'ka'azu legabe, and he goes to Ruvain, Amrle, and he says to Ruvain, Ishav yoloch alpha zuze l'chaye. He says, look, Ruvain, you already collected one of these palaces. If you're willing to inflate the value of the palace that you chaptarain from 500 zuz to 1,000 zuz and consider it as though the loan has been fully repaid and you'll leave me alone, so great. Ve'ilo, and if you're not willing to inflate the price like that, so shkil alpha zuze ve'istalik. So just take these 1,000 zuz and just give me back the property that you already took. I'll keep the two palaces. Here's 1,000 zuz cash and leave me alone. So v'ramim bar chama lemeimar hainu masnisin. So Ram Bar Chama thought to say that 1 second, this should be just like our Mishnah, i.e. the question of, can he do that? Can Levi offer to inflate the price of the palace like that? That our Mishnah had said that if Sarah's heirs want to increase the value of Reuven's estate so that, right, if they want to inflate the value of Reuven's estate so that after the Ksubis are paid, there would still be a dinar left over in the value. They're not allowed to do that. So Rabbi Bar Chama thought to say that the same thing should apply over here, that Levi would be unable to inflate the value of the palace. So Amalei Rav says to Rabbi Bar Chama, Midami, the two cases are not comparable. Hasam, when it came to the heirs, Islu Pseida Liasme, that by Sarah's heirs inflating the price so that they can collect their more expensive ksuba, that negatively impacts Rivka's heirs, who are now going to be forced to receive less from Ruvain's estate. Right? If Sarah's ksuba was 1,000 and Rivka's ksuba was 500, and we're going to allow Sarah's heirs to inflate the value of Reuben's estate so that they can collect their more expensive ksuba, so that they can collect 1,000 while Rivka's heirs are only going to collect 500. Well, that has negative. If we're going to allow Sarah's heirs to inflate the value of Reuben's estate to benefit themselves, that has negative implications for Rivka's heirs who are going to be getting less. But over here, by Levi offering to inflate or suggesting to inflate the value of the palace, that doesn't, Reuven, it's up to him. He can decide. Alpha Yoiv, Alpha Shakil. If he decides to accept the inflated price of the palace and accept it as 1,000, okay, so he gave 1,000 to Shimon, right, when he made the loan, and he's considering it as though he's receiving 1,000 in return. Okay, so if he wants to accept it, that's fine. So now, interestingly, the question is, okay, so let's say Levi had said to Reuven, here, you already chaptara in one of the palaces. If you're willing to accept it as 1,000 zuz, then amazing. So let's say Reuven does accept the palace as 1,000 zuz, even though it was purchased for 500. So tirfa b'chama kozvina. When Levi then goes to Bezdin and says, all right, Bezdin, look, I bought these two palaces from Shimon. There was right now, Shimon, right, he guaranteed achrayus on it, right? Which means that, what that means is that Shimon told Levi at the time that he sold these two palaces to Levi, look, if anybody comes and chapsarain property from you because there was a lien on the property, you come to me and I'll make it good. So now, sure enough, Reuven knocked on Levi's door and said, Levi, you can't buy these properties, there's a lien on them, Shimon owes me money. Levi then said, okay, right, and then he took one of the properties. Levi says, okay, if you're willing to accept that as 1,000 zuz, then great, and for whatever reason he accepts it. So now when Levi goes to Bezdin and says, I need you to write me a document that this happened so that, I have an official document saying that Shimon needs to pay me back for this property that I purchased and was now chapped by Reuven. So Reuven accepted the property as 1,000 zuz. So when Bezdin writes his document, do they put in the document 500 zuz, which is what Levi paid for it, or do they put in 1,000 zuz, which is what Reuven was willing to recognize it as? So Ravina Amar Ba'alfa, Ravina says that we could put 1,000 in there, which is what Reuven accepted it as. Rav Avira Amar B'chomish Mea, whereas Rav Avira says no, we evaluate it as 500, which is the price that Levi paid for it. Also B'chomish Mea, and the halacha is that we would put in the document 500, not 1,000. Haugavid is basically a very similar case. Haugavid Abu Maski Bey Mea Zuzeh. Shimon owed 100 zuz to Reuven. Havule Trei Ktine Da'ara. Shimon had two small little plots of land, right? So Shimon borrowed 100 zuz from Reuven. Shimon has two little plots of land. Chad Zabinu B'chamshin. And Shimon then sold these two little pieces of land to Levi, one for 50 and the other for 50 oichet. Also, Balchov Tarfa Lechad Minayu. So now Reuven goes to Levi and says, hey Levi, you couldn't buy these little properties because I was owed this money, right? Shimon owes Reuven 100 zuz. He sold two little pieces of property to Shimon, sells these two little properties to Levi, each for 50 zuz each. Reuven now comes to Levi and he chaps around one of the properties, and he says that there was a lien on that property, and therefore Reuven's chapping it around. Now Reuven comes to Levi to collect the second little property, right, which is the remainder of what he's owed, right? Each property was 50 zuz. Together, that's 100 zuz, which is what Reuven's owed. He chapped around the first one. Now he's going to chap the second one. Shakul kuv zuzeh. Levi takes 100 zuz. V'ka'azu legabe, and he goes to Reuven. V'amerle, and he says to Reuven, Yishavilach Kuf zuzay l'chay. Look, if you're willing to inflate the price of the small field that you took to be 100 zuz, then givaldig. Ve'ilo, if you're not looking to inflate that, if you're not willing to inflate that, shkol kuf zuzay v'istalik, then just take these 100 zuz, give me back my land, and just get out of here. So Rav Yosef Lemeimaynu Masnisin, Rav Yosef thought to say, well, one second, shouldn't this basically be like our Mishnah, Im Amru Yusom Chule, that if Sarah's heirs want to inflate the value of Ruvain's estate, they're not allowed to. So I would say here as well that we can't just inflate the value of this field. Amalei Abaye says to Rav Yosef, Midami, these cases are not comparable. Hasam Islu Pseida Liyasme, that by Sarah and Rivka and their heirs, by allowing Sarah's heirs to inflate the value of Reuven's estate to be more than a zuz above and beyond the value of the two ksubas, it has negative implications for Rivka's heirs, who now have to accept less of the property, right? Meaning Sarah's heirs are now going to collect 1,000 and Rivka's heirs are only going to collect 500. So by inflating the property, it has negative implications for Rivka's heirs. But over here, what negative implications are there? Me'er Yoiv, Me'er Shakil. As far as Reuven is concerned, he gave 100 zuz, and he's willing to accept that he received 100 zuz in return via this property. So in the case that, in the event that Reuven is willing to accept a small property as 100 zuz, what do we put in the document that Levi can now take to Shimon to say, you now have to pay me back? Ravina Amar B'meya, Rav Avira Amar B'chamshin. Ravina says that we say, well, since Reuven was willing to accept the field at the inflated price of 100 zuz, we could write 100 zuz in the document that Levi can now take to Shimon to reclaim what he lost. Whereas Rav Avira says only 50, which is the amount that that Levi paid for the property. V'chsa b'chamshin, the halacha is 50. Okay, Shimon owed 100 zuz to Reuven. Shachiv. Shimon then died. Shava katina da'ara dehava shavya chamshin zuzeh. And he left over to his kids to inherit a small piece of property that was worth 50 zuz. So again, Shimon borrowed 100 zuz from Reuven. Shimon therefore owes 100 zuz to Reuven. Shimon dies. Shimon left over a small piece of property worth 50 zuz, and that was inherited by his kids. Also, balcho v'katorif le. Now, Reuven comes to the property and he wants to chaperein that field, right? Shimon owes him 100 zuz. He left over to his heirs a little property worth 50. Reuven comes to chaperein this property. Now the heirs say, look, here's 50 zuz. Right? He goes and he chaps around the property. And the heirs just say, you know what, here's 50 zuz, which is the value of the property that you chapped around. Just take these 50 zuz. But guess what he did? He took the 50 zuz, and he came back and wanted to chap around the field a second time as the remaining 50 zuz that he's owed. Also, the Khamid Abai, they came before Abai, Amar Lo, and Abai says the mitzvah leisom lefroach chovavein. He says, look, it's a mitzvah for the heirs to pay their father's, to their father's creditors from the estate. And therefore, you should, he's rightfully owed this, property. So, hani kamoi mitzvah avdisu. So, look, it was good that you gave him that first 50. Hashta kitarif b'din katarif. And now when he's chapping around, he's allowed to chap around the remaining 50. V'lamar and Ella, but that would only be tilo amrulei hani chamshin zuzei t'mei da'ara katina. Haval amrulei hani chamshin zuzei t'mei da'ara katina saluke salkur. Now, but that depends actually on the nature of how they paid him for the 50 zuz. Meaning, Shimon had borrowed 100 zuz from Reuven. Now, Shimon had died and left this small property for his heirs. Reuven had come and chapterain the property. The heirs then paid him 50 zuz to get back the property. So if at the time they'd given the 50 zuz and says, look, we're buying this property from you, well then they're they're purchasing this property from Reuven, and this is a new sale, right? This has nothing to do with Shimon's property anymore, and Reuven can no longer come and collect it a second time because this is a new sale. They bought it from Reuven, it belongs to them now, and this is no longer a property that has a lien on it. But if they didn't do it, in that manner, if they didn't view it as purchase it, if they viewed it as, they were giving it as like part of repayment of the loan, so then the field would still remain, the 50 outstanding zuz, the field would still, there would be a lien on that still, and you would be able to collect it. But if they, said that they were purchasing it from Reuven, so then he would no longer be able to collect it because they purchased the field and it no longer has a lien on it. That was Daf Tzadi Aleph Masechta Ksubis. So the first part of the Daf, we kind of wrapped up the sugya about the situation where like Sarah dies, and then Reuven dies, and then Rivka dies, Hillel Esther, and then we say that in that case Sarah's kids would be able to collect Ksubis b'nei Dichrin, and we also say that that by Rivka's kids collecting the Ksuba, that enables Sarah's kids to collect Ksubis b'nei Dichrin even if there wouldn't be anything left over afterwards. We then got to a new Mishnah where we talk about Ksubis b'nei Dichrin and how there has to be a dinar left over. Reb Shimon says that dinar would have to be karka, it cannot be metaltalin. We said that the value of the estate goes based on the time that the father dies, and if at the time the father dies there was enough, the estate was valuable enough, so then there would be Ksubis b'nei Dichrin even if it later goes down in value, and vice versa as well. And then we talked about all sorts of different cases where people owe money and then creditors are coming and collecting stuff and accepting inflated valuations and stuff. Friends, that was Daf Tzadi Aleph Masechta Ksubis. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.